Okay, so what I'd suggest that we cover this evening is we'll do some general introductions. I'll talk about distributed ledger technology, which is a phrase you'll probably all have heard. I'll talk about blockchain. You'll notice I'm using the two phrases differently. I'll do that in fact, as an extra bonus point, we won't talk about blockchain, we'll talk about blockchains, because there's more than one of them. Okay.
Blockchain what?
Blockchains, as in plural, with an S at the end, because there is more than one blockchain. That's one of the things that people get confused by. I'll talk about the 5 major areas that blockchain is being used, and they're already beginning to be used around the world. But most importantly of all, I'd like this to be a little bit more interactive. So please do just ask questions as we go along. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Right. A little bit more about me, but really good introduction there. That saved me thinking about what it is I've been doing for the last 25 years. Really good. The key thing though is that I am very active in this space. I actually love blockchain and technology, and we'll understand why a little bit more in a moment. I get really enthusiastic, and I like building communities as well. As it was said, I formed a meetup group in London a year ago to talk about initial coin offerings, which is a particular thing about blockchain. And as you said, 1,100 members. I just checked before, I now have 1,200 members, so it's growing and growing. I like building communities, that kind of thing. So I use social media, so if everybody could just smile for Twitter. There we go. So that will be up on Twitter later on this evening, unless anyone has any objections. So, a bit more about me and what I've been doing. As I said, my career spans many industries: retail, pharmaceuticals, commodity trading, mainly in financial services and that kind of thing. I do some work mainly in the insurance sector. Been working with some big insurance companies, helping them understand all about this technology and how to totally change that industry. I helped set up Client Code, which is a technology consultancy practice for a legal firm. You're probably all hearing all the time that blockchain is going to take your job, Internet of Things is going to take your job, artificial intelligence is going to take your job, machine learning is going to take your job, all these things are going to take your job. It's exactly the same in other countries, and in England, a lot of the lawyers are now getting concerned about blockchain because they heard that it's going to take their job. Clyde & Co, who are a legal firm, thought they'd dig into this a little bit more, and so they've set up a technology practice on the basis that if all the other lawyers are going to lose their jobs, they're going to keep theirs, like our building practice type thing, so I'm helping them with that. So that's enough about me. A little bit about you. What kind of industries do you work in? I know there's someone from, was it investment banking? Okay. And we had the automotive dealership. Others?
Quickly, maybe healthcare services.
Well, what kind of sectors?
Healthcare.
Healthcare, yeah.
Packaging.
Packaging, yeah, okay.
ERP.
Which?
ERP.
ERP. ERP in which industry?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing, okay, yeah. Others?
Steel.
Steel, yeah. So manufacturing again? Yeah, just manufacturing very big, very heavy things. Okay. Any others?
Robotics, AI.
Robotics?
Yeah.
Okay, very so is that more on the, as a startup with robotics now?
Yeah, building robotic systems for industries and industrial.
Okay, excellent, okay.
Marketplace.
Marketplace?
Yeah.
Is that on the digital side of things? Or?
It's online battle marketplace basically.
Okay.
Jewelry.
Jewelry. Oh, that's an interesting one.
Tax consultancy.
Tax consultancy, right, excellent one. That reminds me of a really good point I usually make at the beginning of my presentations. Alec mentioned something about the future right at the beginning of his presentation. I always say something as well, that prediction is very, very difficult to do, especially if it's about the future. So if I say anything, it's purely an opinion that might not turn out to be true, because we usually get the future wrong. And the other thing is, anything I say tonight, it's not financial advice, it's not legal advice, it's not taxation advice. So thank you for the reminder. Believe me, I can say we're amongst friends here, but if I do inadvertently say anything, it's not a recommendation to go out and buy it. I mention that because sometimes I end up talking about cryptocurrencies, and I get people who go, oh, should I buy this, should I do it? I'm not going to talk it out. So next quick test with your hand.
Tax and legal.
Tax and legal. Yeah, I'm definitely neither of those. So the other quick check for anyone to hold a hand up. Does anyone own any cryptocurrency?
Just thought about it a number of times, but I've never been able to take a call on it.
Okay, and that's absolutely fine, and that's where a lot of people are at the moment. And it's really, really interesting that where I asked that question has an impact on how many people hold their hands up. So when I asked that question in New York and the United Kingdom, the only people who put their hands up are young people.
Yeah.
And usually the younger they are, the more likely they are that they own cryptocurrency or something. So if I've been in a room with old-fashioned insurance middle-aged men, none of them are into crypto either.
So in India there's another interesting thing where in 12 months back if you would have asked this question, many people would have raised hands because it's some government radar and
and then RBI said, that's fine. And that's a really interesting space around this as well. And usually what I try and do is differentiate between cryptocurrency and blockchain, because you do get this overlap sometimes. And the other thing is that I take a real interest in the regulatory world, primarily in UK, Gibraltar, Malta, USA, Singapore, Malaysia, a few other countries, where they're getting quite interested in what's legal and what isn't. And I find it fascinating, at least in India at the moment with RBI, who are looking at things, I think SEBI from a securities position are looking at things as well. They are at least exploring it, compared to the Chinese approach where they've just said it's illegal.
it's a big deal. So what they have said that banks are not allowed to render any services to any crypto exchanges or anything related to cryptos. So that in a way makes it not illegal, but there are no ways wherein they can operate.
So someone is already holding, it's actually continuing to hold the position because you cannot trade any further.
There were I think 7-8 large crypto exchanges in India, funded millions. They have been all shut down because of this, because no bank is now offering them any services.
Yep.
So you can't remit, you can't do any business. So it's very.
And it's funny as well that in the UK, which is a little bit more ahead on this, you cannot get a bank account if you're trading crypto. They just made it very, very difficult, which is kind of strange. Okay, so this is where we start disappearing into a bit of a deep hole early on, that we start talking about cryptocurrencies and everything. And cryptocurrencies are actually only part of blockchain. So, a quick question for you now. Are there any other things that you've heard about blockchains or distributed ledger technology?
Yeah, real estate.
Yeah, as an idea type thing, yeah. There are currently, to my knowledge, 64 companies looking at developing real estate solutions on blockchain. And we'll cover a particular area of that later on called tokenization, which is exactly that. Has anyone heard any bad things about blockchains? So let's clear the air, because sometimes some people come along and said, oh, I've heard these really bad things about blockchain, really bad.
I don't think people know enough to have put a negative comment.
We need to know a little more about whether it's bad or good actually.
Okay. And that is a really positive approach. I like that. It's you're starting off with an assumption that you know nothing and that you want to learn.
Design thinking.
Sorry?
Design thinking.
Design thinking. There we go. There's lesson learned already. So I'll see if we can go for the excellence type piece in some way. But what I do find is with a lot of audiences.
A question. Food security and blockchain. Have you been?
Yes, I can probably give an example of that actually. Yeah. I'll cover that off later on lectures. What I find is quite often when I'm doing training classes with groups of people, I have to spend the first 10 or 15 minutes uneducating them because they've heard things which are actually wrong. So the kind of things I quite often hear when I'm in meetings like this, and I say, has anyone heard anything bad about blockchains? It's quite often, oh well, they've been hacked, that they can be attacked and that kind of thing. That's actually completely untrue. Blockchains are incredibly resilient, and insurance companies are looking at them as a way of avoiding cyber ransom and attacks and everything. Does anyone work in the insurance industry here, by the way? No? Okay. That's great. That means I can spend all my time talking about the insurance industry and you won't know any better. So I could be telling lies and everything. The other things that I tend to hear where people are cautious about blockchains is that how it's going to consume all the energy of the world.
Excuse me, sir.
Blockchains are actually the cause of global warming.
No, that's only when you mine currency, but that's
Yeah.
not, that's just an application. It's not the overall concept of blockchain.
That's
That doesn't make
right.
sense.
Yeah, and that's usually exactly what I explain on that. So the whole thing about energy consumptions and this and that. A lot of the bad things that people hear about blockchains are associated with cryptocurrencies in some way. So the fact that they say, oh, it's all used for money laundering, or criminal activity, and drug
Weapons and
dealing,
drugs
weapons.
and child trafficking. and
So
all
what
that.
I've heard in banking industry is that it's been used to actually make technology very smooth.
Mhm.
I mean, just to make sure that transactions are secure. I don't know how misnomer it is, but that's what I've been using. That a lot of banks have started using that technology to approve transactions which people are doing globally.
Yep.
So that in a fraction of a second, the security aspect is covered.
Yep.
I don't know.
You're absolutely right. In fact, the banks are some of the major investors in this technology, and the banks are the major applicants for intellectual property rights. So the IP filings and that around the world. And it's really interesting that the likes of JP Morgan, quite a big bank, they have filed many patents around this space, whilst at the same time Jamie Dimon, who's their CEO, has said, oh, it's all rubbish, this technology. So it may be that they're just protecting themselves and they're stopping others from getting in on the game. It may be that they've realised that IP violations, it's interesting to talk about Nokia before. Does anyone know Samsung's major source of revenue?
iPhone. Yeah.
Yeah, they use the technology from Samsung.
Currently is the iPhone.
Yeah. The major source of revenue, a lot of the thing on Samsung, is patent violation and patent licensing. It's not making mobile phones. I was amazed by this. And this is the thing where perhaps Nokia went wrong, where they focused their design thinking around making phones when they should have been thinking about different revenue sources and that kind of thing. So where were we? So that was JP Morgan. They're taking out some patents on this. It's a really interesting space. Okay. So let's talk quickly about what a ledger is. Now, you work in financial services. We have someone in taxation, that kind of thing. But does anybody else know what a ledger actually is?
It's a balances.
Oh! The finance man wants to move in quickly.
It's a balances of give and take, in a normal sense.
It's a record.
Yeah, it's a record where so input is output. You need to know where exactly the gap is.
Yep. Who said it's a record? Great. That's about as simple as it gets. Absolutely. So if I'm in business and I hand over some money to somebody else, the way businesses work is that I keep a ledger that says that I've just paid 10 rupees, and you also keep a ledger to say you've received 10 rupees. Now, in particular in the financial services sector, but I know in supply chain as well, what then happens is that we reconcile our ledgers. We make sure that my ledger matches your ledger. Okay? And actually, most businesses have got thousands of transactions per day. And so there are thousands of these records which are saying who I sent money to, how much I sent it for, what the date was, and a couple of other things. So we have to do massive reconciliations. So I do my reconciliations, you do your reconciliations, you do your reconciliations. Does everyone think that their own companies all do these reconciliations as well? We'll do, don't we? Yeah. Are any of your companies really good at reconciling? No, and by good, I mean, in the adverts and magazines promoting your company, you say, we're the world's leading reconciliation company. We reconcile our internal data so well.
Haven't seen it.
Haven't seen it. You're not going to. There's a few shaking heads here. Because reconciliation is just a cost. It's an overhead. It doesn't add any value. It's simply me checking that my records are correct, you checking your records correct, who's matching them out. And in fact, you'll find in some accountancy departments what happens is that they reconcile the data by getting a copy of your data, a copy of my data, copying it into Excel, and then they like to reconcile the Excel spreadsheet against the extract, and then they reconcile that, and they reconcile that, and they create entire teams of people who are just checking the numbers and not adding any value. So can everyone see that's not very efficient? And that's the way most businesses work right now. So imagine for a moment, we all had one ledger, one single spreadsheet in the middle, say. And whenever we update that record, say, I've paid 10, gets written in that ledger, and you access that same ledger. You no longer have your own ledger, I no longer have my own ledger, just that one ledger. Can you imagine how much effort and time that now saves? Because there's nothing to reconcile anymore. It's incredibly efficient. So this is the thing that for accountants and for auditors in particular, if you have a single ledger, there's a lot of work suddenly gone away because there's not this overhead. So it's a great way of saving costs. That's why a lot of companies are exploring this now, particularly in the banking sector, because it's a way of them reducing their costs. Okay, so that's a ledger. Now imagine we've got a single ledger and we have a system that guarantees that we can give everybody an exact copy of it, such that it's absolutely identical. Okay, so we've all now got our own copy of the exact same ledger that we don't need to reconcile. That's still okay? So that's what's called a mutual ledger. In fact, a mutual distributed ledger, because now it's distributed, so you now have a copy, you have a copy, you have a copy, and so on. It's not very efficient, but what it does mean is that everyone's got an exact copy of the ledger, which means that now I know that you know that this data is the same as what I'm looking at. And the data that you're looking at is, you know, is the same that I'm looking at. So that develops trust. And trust is an interesting feature, whereby usually anything that involves trust, we introduce a third party. So we quite often involve lawyers in some way for like complex transactions. And the reason we use lawyers is because if we're doing a house purchase, for example, where you might have a property deed, I might have some money, and I know we've only just met and I know you're a lovely person, but I don't quite trust you to hand over a lot of cash. So we use a lawyer. Now actually, you don't trust the lawyer and I don't trust the lawyer. But the lawyer is insured and they have a license, so we know that if anything goes wrong, that we can sue them. So the lawyer actually provides a function of trust. This is the thing, if you now have a single ledger that everyone agrees to access in the same way, you've greatly simplified that trust element. Does that make sense to everybody?
I think ICICI Bank in India is one of the largest banks in India. They're only doing this.
Exactly, so quite a few banks have started.
Quite a few apps are also there, like there's an app called Streetwise.
No, but then we just want to understand what exactly
it is a similar thing.
Yeah, a lot of things as well is you may hear, oh, this company is using blockchain, this company is using, but most of the time they aren't.
Who is writing on this ledger? Basically, who is creating this ledger?
So it can be all of us, in effect. If we're all interacting in
There are
business.
in any ledger, somebody is created, somebody is approving. Suppose it's a common ledger, obviously, but who is creating and suppose two parties has to agree to what is written over there, right?
Yep. So this is a really important point. You have two types of distributed ledger. One is called a public ledger, and one is a private ledger. Okay. If it's a public ledger, and Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, is an example of this, anybody can write to that ledger, and they have a system which validates that the data is correct. Okay. It's quite a complex one. This is a thing called mining, which is about this. That is an expensive computing thing. The other way is if you have a private ledger, that's where a group of people, so for example, I work in the insurance industry, we have brokers and underwriters and third parties who all effectively know each other, and they decide who it is who validates what goes in and everything like that. But that's a very good point. Does that answer that question?
I'm trying to just visualize what is how will it happen actually.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of confusion, like in your day-to-day transaction or daily basis, somebody is sending goods, he's sending suppose 100 kgs,
Yep.
and the person, because of like, I'm talking of fruits and vegetables, he's using 99 kgs.
Yeah. And this is a really important thing. That it's all well and good having this common ledger, but we all have to agree what the numbers are in the first place.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And this is the thing with fresh food and that kind of thing. I might think it's 100 kilos, you think it's 99 kilos. We have to agree at the beginning as to whose number is going to go in. But we have to all agree as to which that number is.
Ultimately, it has to be based on contracts which are...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. Okay, so we've just very, very quickly covered there what a ledger is, what a distributed ledger is, and what a mutual ledger is, and actually the difference between public and private. Alec, were you going to ask something there?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that under all this, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is the distributed network of internet and the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure, which allows the creation of this common ledger, this
Mhm.
public.
That's correct.
space.
And that actually leads on to the next thing, which is what blockchain is. It all ties in nicely with that. So, I'll explain what a blockchain is. But first, can anyone tell me what a protocol is?
Set of rules.
Rules? Yeah.
Agreed upon rules.
Binding rules. Binary rules? Yeah. So they're nice and clear. Okay. Sorry, I didn't catch your name before. I'm Gary. Sunil. Hey there. That was a protocol. That was a basic social protocol where when somebody walks up and hello, I'm Gary, you hold your hand out to show. It's a way of interacting. It's an informal set of rules, or it can be a formal set of rules that just says how we're going to deal with each other. Okay, so that was a good. Thank you for that. Another example: everyone uses smartphones. These have all got Bluetooth embedded into them. Bluetooth is a protocol that allows my mobile phone to talk to many other things, which is fantastic. Protocols are what got me really excited about blockchain, because blockchain is a protocol. And the reason that I got excited was when I realised it was a protocol, because protocols are actually really, really boring and no one knows about them, but they change the world. So another example, do we have any technology people in the room? Okay. The ones who put their hands up, keep your hands down. Okay? Who can tell me what TCP/IP is?
CCBIP.
TCP/IP. Anybody?
IP is Internet Protocol.
Yeah?
TCP, I'm forgetting.
PCI.
Transfer control protocol.
It is. Give them out biscuits. So transfer control program, internet protocol. Most people will use it. It's a thing called the internet. Okay, and we use the internet day in, day out, but we don't even realise what it is that we're using. Another one, which is a protocol, HTTP. Yeah, now everyone knows that, because on the web browser, they see HTTP, // whatever. Right, so HTTP is the protocol used to develop what's called the World Wide Web. Okay. And again, it's a protocol. Can anyone explain to me how HTTP works? Or care to just go through the OSI 7-layer model? No?
No.
But can anyone use a website? You can? Okay, so there you go. It's me illustrating again. You don't need to know about the protocol in order to take the business benefit from it in some way. This is the great thing about blockchain. Blockchain as a concept is a protocol that was created originally through, the first one was a white paper written by a fictional character called Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008, and we don't know who she is.
Or is it a he or she?
Or who they are, or who he is. So it's a fictional thing. So this is a really interesting thing, that if we look at protocols, TCP/IP, one of the founders of that was a guy called Vince Cerf, who lives in California. So if you ever have any questions, you can always walk up to Silicon Valley, prod him in the stomach and say, what's this, Vince? Likewise with HTTP, that was created by Tim Berners-Lee in Switzerland. And so we all know who he is, and he's a professor at Oxford now, so I can go and visit him. Satoshi Nakamoto, we've no idea who they are, but they wrote this protocol originally. And remember I said that TCP/IP is the internet, which allows exchange of data. It was the point at which we no longer needed to use floppy disks. We actually had computers connected to each other. And the World Wide Web was a protocol of information sharing. So we could render on one page of a website and it looked pretty much the same on another one. The great thing about blockchain is it's a protocol for exchanging value. Now, that sounds quite dull and boring again. The thing about the internet, that allows you to copy data, and the web allows you to share information. But the only way that we can usually exchange value without a third party being involved is this thing called cash, where if I hand that over, there's no third party involved and we've exchanged value. Okay? And that is the thing about blockchain, that blockchain will allow an exchange of value without a trusted third party in the middle. So if we wanted to transact some way internationally, if I go back to London and you want to send me some money, you'd probably do that through a bank account. or PayPal or Western Union or something like that. So you're using a third party. Okay, so imagine we could do that, but without a third party, where effectively I've got an app on my phone, and you've got an app on your phone, and you transfer it across the blockchain without any other third party being involved. Now to me that's quite a groundbreaking concept, quite an exciting thing. Okay, so that's the beginnings of what blockchain is. It's just a set of rules and instructions about how things interact. Okay, the next thing is to go into a little bit more detail about why it's... Does anyone know why it's called blockchain?
Because each transaction is a block and it's a chain of blocks.
I wish you'd have said that at the beginning because you could have said no. Okay, so if we go back to, remember we were talking about a ledger before, and a ledger is simply a set of records, a set of instructions. Probably most people here won't remember how we used to have paper ledgers. You know, actual books where people would fill in records. Oh, we've got some people saying yes. Okay, right. Okay. So imagine for a moment we've got a book, a ledger. Remember I said it's this shared ledger now that everyone's using, and in this book, at the bottom of the page, we do a special mathematical calculation. It's called a cryptographic hash. And all it is, it's a bit of mathematics that if you put a set of numbers or data into it, it'll come up with a unique value, which will be output. And if you change anything at all to those numbers, that cryptographic hash will change. So it's a little bit like an electronic signature, or sorry, a thumbprint type thing. So it's a unique thing. Change anything at all on the input, then the output will change. But also, if you don't change the data and you give it to somebody else and they run the algorithm, they'll come up with exactly the same answer. So it's a great way of validating that it's actually the original. Is everyone clear on that? Because that is quite a difficult concept without me drawing things on there. So imagine bottom of the page, you've got this cryptographic hash, which is unique for that page. Now we turn our page over, and the first thing we write at the top of the next page is that same cryptographic hash from the previous page. Okay? Now we fill in our records, first of all our transactions today, and then at the bottom of that page, we do another cryptographic hash, which now includes that hash from the previous page, and so on and so on. So think of each page as a block, which are now chained together with these cryptographic hashes. Did you hear what I said then? Each block chained together, cryptographic hashes, hence block chain. That's all it is. Not more complicated.
Each transaction is a block.
No, this was the thing we were saying, that usually each page is a block,
Okay.
and each page can have multiple transactions in it. And this is where a lot of people, when they're designing things like analytics on top of blockchains, get it wrong. That it's not the transactions that are chained together, it's the blocks that are chained together.
Can you edit a block?
Sorry?
Can you edit a block?
Can you delete a block?
Edit.
Edit block? No. And this is a great thing. Sorry.
You can edit, but then the hash value will change if you edit.
Exactly. So the correct answer is you can change your block, but if you do, everyone will know that you have, because the cryptographic hash will change. So what it means is that you have what's called a tamper-resistant solution, which means it's not tamper-proof. If you throw enough computing at it, you could potentially change it, but everyone would notice that all of these signatures on each page has changed. So it's a little bit like, if you imagine this paper ledger again for a moment, and it's got all cryptographic hashes written in, if at the end of the year an auditor comes along, and the auditor recalculates pages, he'll notice that something's changed.
Everything will change based on that. Suppose I change one block,
Yep.
and all the respective, because the balances are carried forward to another blocks.
Exactly, yeah. So it means it's incredibly difficult to change anything without people noticing. That's correct, yeah. So effectively, what it means is that the blockchain becomes append only. So you can't delete records, you can't edit records, because if you did, it would be very, very obvious. That's where you'll hear the phrase immutable used, which means effectively write only on that. Yeah. Okay. So that's all the blockchain is.
So the thing is, we write transactions on a page, right? Before we create a block.
Yep.
So these transactions can be between only two parties, or can multiple parties in that page?
Multiple parties, yeah. And this is where, again, you know, we're saying the protocol is a set of rules deciding things. That will decide as to who can write to it and who can't write to it.
But every transaction will only be between two parties. Or
Well,
can that be between three parties as well?
will only be 3.
Each transaction will always be between, at any point in time, the lowest common denominator will be 2 parties, right? Or
Yes, yeah,
it cannot be 3 parties at the same time.
correct.
Because that will be a new transaction then.
Correct. So any transaction you do, even if it is a multi-party transaction, you can break it down as me transacting with you, me transacting with you, me transacting with you. Even if it's all related,
Okay,
it's effectively 3. That's correct. Okay.
Why do you say that it's only cryptocurrency involved in blockchain? Is there nothing else?
No. So going to lead on to that in a moment. In fact.
Cryptocurrencies is a bad child of blockchain.
Yeah.
That was a start, but
Cryptocurrency is not the only thing.
No, let's get on to that.
People assume that it is for cryptocurrency, but that's not the case.
I love it. They're moving on to my next section already, which is the 5 major use cases. This is really good. I should just sit down and leave you to carry on. Alex.
Just a comment. When you gave your explanation, the notion of trust is being put in the public space. And because everybody knows the information, if you try to change, then you break the trust chain. And that is the essence of...
And that is very powerful, because it means that anything where you're using someone to provide trust at the moment, they may no longer need to do that. So that has quite an impact on it.
Which is also, I think, the foundational concept behind money in general, because a group of people combined are trusting and believing that this money is worth this much of.
You're absolutely right. Have I got any here? I'll stay with British money, because I know I won't offend anybody if I say British money. But I do often ask this question in cryptocurrency talks of, can anyone tell me what guarantees that this £10 note is worth £10? Sorry?
It is guaranteed by central bank of the respective.
It's guaranteed by the Bank of England, yes. And I've had this conversation with a man at the Bank of England about what guarantees that this £10 is worth £10, and he said exactly the same thing. And I said, oh, so because it's backed by a bank, it's backed by a government, that means it's completely trustworthy. He said, oh yeah, absolutely. I said, oh. What if that government was Venezuela, or Zimbabwe, or Cyprus, or any other number of countries where the country is collapsed or the currency is collapsed? So this is worth £10 because enough people perceive it is worth £10. And it's backed by a government which has the military, guns, that kind of thing to back that up. But there's no actual financial thing which links it. Until 1931, there was. Most currencies used to be linked to what's called gold standard, which means that there's actually gold tucked away in vault somewhere, and so I could walk on to the Bank of England, count the £10 in, and they could give me £10 of gold. That got stopped many years ago, so that's kind of fun. But this leads in nicely. That's an example of cryptocurrency. In fact, that's talking beyond that to what money is. Money is quite often it's used as a store of value or an exchange of value. But cryptocurrency, as was rightly said a moment ago, is just one of many use cases of how blockchain is being used. And I describe it that if we think at a really high level, there are 5 major areas where blockchain is being used already. One is as a cryptocurrency. So you'll have heard of Bitcoin, you may have heard of Ethereum, you may have heard of Litecoin, Ripple, which actually Ripple is a bank-supported cryptocurrency. There are many. There are actually over 2,000 cryptocurrencies now which are out there. So that is definitely a use case where money transfer and that kind of thing is certainly being looked at. There are quite large startups that are funded by banks. There's a company called R3, which is New York and UK based, who are working very closely with banks about developing blockchain solutions to massively improve their payment gateways and that. Swift, who is the organisation who most of the major banks around the world interact with, they've been looking at using blockchain because they've realised if they don't, they'll probably be out of business, because that would be quite a major thing. And Ripple, as I mentioned before, that's funded by, I think it's JP Morgan and a few others. They're looking at using it as a money transfer thing. The next area is as a distributed ledger, which is simply a ledger of transactions. Several people say they work for manufacturing industries. Okay, so imagine in a supply chain, the ability to trace your raw materials or to trace where your products have gone to in some way. So the example that I quite often use is there's a company in the UK called Everledger, and Everledger trace diamonds.
What do you call Everledger?
Yeah, Ever, so EVER Ledger, LEDGER, and they use it for tracking diamonds. And so what happens is when a diamond is mined out of the ground, apparently a diamond has got about 22 different facets to it. So that the edges, the lines, but being male, I thought the diamond only had one facet, which is how much does it cost? turns out it has many more. And so what Everledger do now is that when the diamond comes out of the ground, they record that on a blockchain, and that then means they've got a record against that diamond. So when the diamond then goes to Mumbai for the initial polish, another record is added to say it's gone to there. Then it goes to Rotterdam for another polish, gets added to there. And then when it goes to London to, I forgot the name, Hatton Gardens, I think it is, where all the big diamonds get sold, the record gets appended there. And then when the actual diamonds sold onto an individual, again, another record is written to the blockchain. Notice I didn't say the record is updated, I said another record is added. So you've now got a complete history of this diamond. And what that does is it means it's really, really powerful, because there are regulations around what's known as the Kimberley process, which is about blood diamonds. So making sure that diamonds haven't come from illegal countries and this kind of thing. So now you've got a complete record of this diamond and its history and everything. Does that make sense to everybody? It does seem fairly sensible.
Yes.
That's why I love it as a use case. Because everyone goes, oh yeah, I understand that now. You know, diamond traceability onto a blockchain, complete history, yeah. So extend that thought now to fine art. So, you know, what works of art and that kind of thing. And Everledger are working on that. Or car manufacture. So in Australia now, they're looking at when a car gets produced, putting that record onto a blockchain. And the reason for doing that is because then you can start doing things like putting its maintenance records on a blockchain. So I don't know, many of you have cars here, but nowadays when you take your car in for a service, for maintenance and that, the logbook is electronic.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay? So who gets to keep that record when you sell your car?
Manufacturer has the records.
Correct. Okay. Well, if it's my car, why don't I get to own that record of its maintenance history? Now, in the old days, you used to have what was called a logbook and a maintenance record, and you can hand that over to the next buyer. But now, because it's all electronic, the manufacturer controls it. So in Australia, what we're looking at doing is actually putting the maintenance history onto a blockchain, and then the owner of the vehicle owns that data, so they can then transfer that. So that's quite an interesting one. So then we can start extending into other areas. So an example is Maersk shipping. Has anyone heard of Maersk? They do something like, I think it's 40% of the container shipping around the world. So they're absolutely massive. They've started a project with a few insurance companies called InsureWaves, where they're now tracking and tracing. Initially it's actually the ships, which can't be that difficult. I mean, I've worked in commodities trading. We used to charter 90,000 ton tankers, and you can't exactly lose them very easily. But apparently it is actually quite difficult to keep track of where a ship is at any point in time. So the insurance companies are getting excited by this because they can now record where a vessel has been all the time, so they can tell if it's gone through pirate waters or war zones or anything, and change the insurance premium. So that's quite an interesting growth area. So anything in a supply chain, and this is where the likes of BMW, Daimler-Benz, Renault, Ford, and several car manufacturers are now all exploring using blockchains to track and trace either raw materials or original equipment manufactured data as well. So, two use cases we've described so far: distributed ledgers, so simply the traceability of things. So someone mentioned about food before, tracing food? Yeah, okay. So again, in London, there's a company called Provenance. They're actually tracking tuna fish stocks to make sure it's come from sustainable stock. And also, does Walmart operate in India?
They're trying
Very
hard.
soon, yeah.
Very active. They've been trying for a while.
Yeah, watch Walmart, because they are very acquisitive and they grow very, very fast, and they're one of the major retailers, certainly in the States and in Europe as well. So Walmart have just mandated within the next 2 years that all of the food supplies that are coming into them will be blockchain enabled through suppliers, because they want to start using blockchain to actually track and trace all product and everything. So I know that you've got Subway in this country. Do you have Pret a Manger? Pret?
No.
So Pret's a company that does sandwiches, and they again are expanding rapidly. I've seen them in Singapore and Tokyo, so I can see they're going all over the place. They had a real problem a few weeks ago about a customer with a nut allergy. You know, someone who's allergic to a nut in some way. And this customer was so badly affected that they died. And when they tracked it back, it was because of where the sandwich had been made. Now, if they had a blockchain-enabled platform that allowed them to track and trace that, they could then prove that it had come from a proper place where it hadn't. So food is definitely an area that a lot of companies are looking at. So we've got the use cases so far is there's a ledger, so for like supply chain, that type of thing. There's a cryptocurrency. Next one is around identity. So this is one of the things, I know in India you have the Aadhaar project, around the identity card, okay? Which is interesting because I think that was introduced in 2017, around about the same time that blockchain was beginning to get exciting. It's just a shame that the two didn't quite come together. Because there's another country that has adopted it for identity management. Has anyone heard of Estonia?
Estonia.
Yeah. Does anyone know where Estonia is? Good?
In Europe.
In Europe, yeah. Okay. I was in Dubai a few months ago and I asked the question, does anyone know where Estonia is? And a lady put her hand up and she said, I'm from Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia. I said, fantastic, that's great. Tell me what you think about your neighbours. And by that, I don't mean the people who live next door, I mean the country next to you. Yeah. So you think about the geography, Estonia, roughly speaking, North Europe, kind of Sweden on one side and Scandinavia, and Russia on the other side. And the neighbours get quite acquisitive at times where they come and visit with tanks and they stay for a few years and they don't like going home and eventually they go back in there. So Estonia has kind of realised that this is a political threat. And so they've developed a blockchain-based platform against which all the identities of people go onto and also all the identities of assets that are owned, so like property and land and so on. And this means that they've now got a immutable ledger that is distributed around the world, that if one day the neighbours come to visit for a while and don't leave straight away, and leave a few years later, they'll now have an immutable ledger of who everybody is and what property they own. So that's quite an amazing thing around identity management.
So is this the technology they're using for e-residency also?
Yes, in fact e-residency is brilliant. What Estonia has introduced is an identity management scheme where they're using blockchain around this and they developed it and implemented it. There are, I think the population of Estonia is 1.7 million people. Okay, which means, sorry Alec, you've got, was that an Apple Mac you had before? So you can actually hold the whole Estonian population on your laptop. It's not many people, 1.7 million. But Estonia's developed this great solution, it's only used by 1.7 million people. So they thought, well, how can we use this differently? So they've actually extended what's called the e-residency scheme, which is where you can get digital identity, where anybody can apply for it, send in your evidence of who you are, pay, I think it's €100 at the moment, and you then get an e-residency card, which allows you to set up a trading business in Estonia. Now that's probably not too relevant for you here, but if you're in a country called Great Britain, and you've just decided to leave this thing called the EU through this thing called Brexit, then having an Estonian identity for you to set up a company is actually a very good way of continuing to trade with Europe, and I'm amazed that big companies haven't been thinking about this. But yeah, absolutely, so the e-residency scheme is a great example of actually identity in use on there. Identity. The other thing I didn't mention, a blockchain ultimately, I define it as it's a write-only database that's distributed and cryptographically secured. But there's another feature to it, and that's what I call trusted programmability. So you might have heard this term smart contracts. Yeah? Smart contracts, they're neither smart nor contracts. They are computer programs, and we've had computer programs before. So this is why I describe smart contracts as actually trusted programmability. Because you know the way I was saying before that we've now got this ledger that everyone trusts? Well, think exactly the same if we've now got this computer program that everyone trusts, and everyone agrees that whatever result it comes up with, that is the correct answer. So this is trusted programmability. Because this means you can do clever things like if you can link your smart contract into, say, a flight delay mechanism, where flights, when they get delayed, are automatically reported, then in the insurance industry, what you can then set up is a flight delay insurance compensation scheme that automatically pays out. Now, has anyone ever been on a flight that's been delayed? Has anyone ever been on a flight that's been delayed and made an insurance claim on the insurance policy for the delay?
Not even bother. So much hassle already.
Right, and that's exactly it. And the insurance companies actually know that. That's why they're quite happy with it, because it means they're never going to have to pay out. And I say that embarrassingly as an insurance industry person. But you're absolutely right, it's usually lots of hassle. I asked someone a few weeks ago, and this was to an insurance audience, and someone put their hand up and said, oh yeah, it worked really well, it was really, really easy, it only took a week.
Only took a week.
Only took a week, and she was actually really happy with that. Well, imagine that you're sitting on the aeroplane, on the tarmac, and you've taken out your insurance policy through a smart contract. And then what happens is, as you're sitting on the aeroplane, you've now been sitting there for about an hour or so, and you notice the engineer stirs against the engine and gets his hammer out and starts hammering and gets some tape. And I used to be a pilot, and it scares me when I look at engineers doing things like that, because I know what can go wrong. Well, imagine you're now sitting on the aeroplane for an hour, and your phone pings to say that your compensation's just been paid. Now that's a different experience, okay. And that's where smart contracts are beginning to be used. So I work with a Vienna-based company called Risk, and they actually developed an insurance product for flight delay which works exactly like that. There's a big insurance company called AXA, and they've developed a product called Fizzy, which is a flight delay thing again. And this is the whole thing, that if you can do something where you can say, if this event has definitely happened, then automatically pay out, it totally transforms things. That's smart contracts, that's programmability. So that's 4 of the areas. So as a ledger, as cryptocurrency, as identity, and smart contracts. The 5th one is a thing called tokenization, which you're probably going to start hearing more and more about this.
Tokenization.
Tokenization.
Yeah.
Go and start reading about blockchain and tokenization, because this is the next big thing, definitely. The idea that we're going to tokenize everything. So I noticed in town earlier on today there's a Starbucks. So presumably you'll have like Starbucks points if you go in there, kind of thing. And you probably have loyalty points and Avios points and all that kind of thing. Well, they get all kind of loyalty points which are forms of tokens. So imagine those tokens being on a blockchain instead. That just makes things a little bit different there. And then extend it even further. If you buy a property in Calcutta at the moment, how much is an apartment these days?
So it depends on this location.
In New Calcutta.
We have Nuttal also coming up.
Okay, so this is the thing, you probably see that all the prices going up. Now, that makes it difficult enough if you're buying a property. But if you're an investor who invests in properties, do you really want to put all of your money into one property? Because it might go wrong. Well, how about if you take that investment and slice it up into 1,000 shares, okay, and then you tokenize those shares, so you put them on the blockchain, and then you can buy and sell those tokens, in effect, of that property. What it now means is, as an investor, instead of me buying a property for, say, 2 core or something, I can buy with 1,000th of that one, 1,000th of that one, 1,000th, so I can diversify my portfolio, which means I don't pay any taxes on those things. So remember, this was not a taxation advice earlier on. So this is what I'm seeing some companies working on at the moment, about using tokenization of physical assets, either in whole...
Is that working anywhere?
Yeah.
Tokenization of fixed assets?
Yeah, it's already going. So in the UK, has anyone heard of the Royal Mint? Yeah, the Royal Mint is actually a government-owned organisation which produces gold sovereigns. They're about to launch a project up called RMG, which is Royal Mint Gold, which is actually a token against which the asset is a physical sovereign in some way. Which I find fascinating. That, you remember I mentioned earlier on that money, like this, was disconnected from the gold standard in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So we've got the traditional money being delinked from the gold standard, and suddenly tokens through crypto being added to the gold standard, that are being linked together. So there are lots and lots of projects going on. Real estate, as I say, there's over 60 projects I know of companies that are either slicing up an asset into fractional ownership or providing loans, and they're fractionally splitting up the loans in some way.
So it's about to be launched in India. ICICI Bank is launching it
Okay.
for rural land ownership. So they're slicing it up and giving fractional loans to farmers, which they are being able to pay back, so it will reduce farmer suicides.
But what about giving you the ownership of that land in
That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
ICICI Bank. It's about to launch.
Because I'm just trying to figure out that how, at least in India, which is so much of...
I'm a farmer, I own a land. It will be broken up into about say 1,000 different
So are you
tokens.
bypassing the panchayat system or the stamp
Absolutely,
duty system?
absolutely. And the blockchain that is being maintained is, so I can pay back say 100 tokens today depending on how much money I made, and I can perhaps take a second mortgage on whatever I paid back to get my cash flow running, so that way I don't kill myself in the process.
And what it also means is effectively you now introduce a secondary market, which is the sale of the tokens themselves. And secondary market introduce additional liquidity, which actually helps the whole economy. So that's quite interesting.
Only this time it won't be like the crash of the subprime.
Getting stored.
So, being a consultant, my favourite phrase is "it depends," and it really does. So, if you've got something where you've got like Bitcoin, for example, Bitcoin there's over 6,000 copies.
6,000.
6,000. If you're operating on, remember I said about a private ledger before, so a private blockchain, it might be that there's just half a dozen of you that in some way who are interacting. The other thing I didn't mention as well before is, you know the way I said that everyone has an exact copy of all the data? Imagine if it was really as open as that. Would Barclays Bank really want ICI Bank to see what all the transactions are? So actually it's cryptographically secured so that they can't see each other's data. They're on that. But in terms of answering the question of how many need to be on, it depends upon what it is. So I know some supply chain projects where they've got half a dozen entries. So like Maersk Shipping has got one, Amlin have one, Catlin have one, Willis have one. So it can be just a few. And this is the other interesting thing as well. I do other talks about why blockchains fail, or why blockchain projects fail. And one of them is that if you're trying to adopt blockchain technology, it has to be across your business process. So if you're doing something like supply chain, it's no point if some layer in the supply chain aren't part of your blockchain platform, because you're going to lose the history. You're going to play on that. So I know that's a kind of a non-answer, but it's the best I can offer on that. Anything else?
Who pays for this platform?
Who pays for?
This platform of blockchain. Suppose if I want to introduce blockchain in my company,
Yep.
whom do I go to and how should I buy it?
So it might be that you need to look at a software supplier in some way who might be developing it. So as an example, there's a big protocol called Hyperledger. Hyperledger is actually an open source platform, so the software itself is free. IBM supports Hyperledger extensively. Anyone from IBM here? No? Okay, so I can say
No, but
so.
we build on Hyperledger, so
Sorry?
we're building a project on Hyperledger.
Yeah. And it might be that you'll then deploy that on something like Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, AWS.
Which is a classic example on that. Yeah. Anything else?